I've got the world's greatest computer right here. It's got all my software just the way I like it, and everything's perfect, and my connectivity and my web browser, and I love this computer. And the last thing I want is any bad person, or at least person who isn't authorized, to be logging into this computer and potentially doing evil things. So, to prevent that, the number one most important thing we've got to be able to do is make strong passwords. For CompTIA, the bottom line is that a password should be about 8 characters long, should include upper and lowercase characters as well as numbers. Now, for me, I would want at least 10 characters, upper and lowercase, numbers, and special characters like exclamation points and pound signs and things like that. Whatever the case may be, in order for this to work, you've got to make Windows want to do that. You've got to make Windows say, if you're going to make a password, it has to be strong. And on top of that, you want to be able to track people who are trying to log in. And what are you going to do if somebody tries logging in 4 or 5 times? Don't you want to stop them? No worries. Windows has all the tools to do that. And it all boils down to your local security policy. Every version of Windows has it. Let's look at it on Windows 7. You can get to your local security policy the exact same way through every version of Windows. All you need to do is get to your control panel, then click on Administrative Tools, and you'll see it right there, Local Security Policy. Let's open that guy up. All right, your local security policy sets up all kinds of incredible security stuff. I'm just going to show you a little bit in terms of protecting your system from people logging into it, but it can go a lot further than that. But let's start with these because it works out really well. So we'll look under Account Policies, and you'll see we have 2 subfolders, Password Policy and Account Lockout Policy. So let's click on Password Policy. Now there's a couple of things in here. If you look at Password Policy, first of all it'll say password must meet complexity requirements. My current password does not meet complexity requirements, so if I actually hit OK here, I'm going to have to re-log into Windows. So I'm going to cheat, and right now I'm just going to say disabled. You can look at, let me hit disabled. And it'll actually explain what the complexity requirements are. So that it goes into a lot of detail there. So it's a great way if you don't want people to use passwords like 1, 2, 3, 4, you just turn on this policy. And anytime a new user's created or a password's done, they have to make it complexable. Here's a minimum password length. Minimum and maximum password age. You can basically say how long can this password be before someone can change it. Enforced password history basically prevents people from using the same password over and over again. So when they change it, it'll remember how many passwords back you want. You can literally tell them. So in this case, I'm going to say remember the last 5 passwords. So when they change their password, they won't be able to use any of the last 5. So you can do a lot of really cool stuff, and this comes in every version of Windows. So, account lockout policy. This basically means if somebody logs into your computer, how many attempts do they get before they get locked out? So, here it says account lockout threshold is 5 invalid login attempts. So after 5 attempts, they're locked out for 30 minutes. That'll make you really popular as administrator. Now this third option, reset account lockout counter after, right now it's set to 30 minutes, that takes a little explaining. Now you see, every time you log in incorrectly, you have an invalid login attempt. So you get up to 5. Now let's say you logged in 3 times and you keep getting it wrong. Now the problem you have here is that you know, because it's your machine, that if you log in 2 more times, you're going to be locked out for 30 minutes, and you don't want to be locked out for 30 minutes. So this tells the system how long to wait before you go back to 0 attempts. So I'm going to set this to something more realistic, like 5 minutes. So now let's say you log in 4 times and you know it's wrong, and it's wrong every time. You know if you log in 1 more time, you're going to be locked out for 30 minutes. So how long do you have to wait until you go back to 0? Now I've got it set to 5 minutes. So this is good for those legitimate people who just don't remember their password. Now, passwords are great, and passwords are very strong if you do it right within a Windows environment. But sometimes you need more than a password. There's the whole concept of what we call multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication combines a username and password with one of 3 things: something you know, which would be a username and password, something you have, which could be a key fob or a smart card or something like that, or something about you, which could be your fingerprint or your retina or something that's unique to you. So we've already got something you know, which is a username and password. So let's take a look first at biometrics. All right, this is like the biggest laptop I've ever seen in my entire life. Anyway, it's got all kinds of features, but the one thing it does have on here, if you see right here, this is a little biometric control device where you just swipe your finger over it and it will memorize your fingerprint. So to use these, they go into two modes. You go into what's called training mode, where it trains itself to memorize your fingerprint. You usually have to do it 3 or 5 times. And then you switch it out of training mode, and then every time this computer boots up, it will boot up and you type in your username and password, but then you have to swipe your finger just to log into Windows. Now, fingerprint scanners are fairly common. You'll see them used from time to time, but the A+ actually mentions retinal scanners. Now, I'm sorry that I'm laughing. I've been in the IT industry for 30 years, and I have seen a retinal scanner exactly one time, and that was at a network operations center in Miami, Florida. Other than that, odds are the only place you're ever going to see a retinal scanner is if you're playing a game like, I don't know, say Half-Life. Bottom line is that a biometric is always going to have some aspect of you, whether it's your fingerprint or your retina. They use the wrist, in your wrist, the veins in your wrist. There's all kinds of crazy biometrics that are out there. Biometrics are also a pain. So another alternative that people tend to go with are encryptions that use some kind of key. The key is known by the organizational group RSA, which is 3 guys, I can never remember their name, but they use an encryption methodology that uses this key for authentication. So this key can be stored on a key fob, it can be stored on a smart card, RFID, infrared. I even have it here on this little guy right here. This is my World of Warcraft authenticator. If you actually watch, every few seconds this 8-digit code changes. So when I log into World of Warcraft, I actually type in my username and my password, and then I have to type in this 8-digit code, and then I'm in. So this has been very, very handy. World of Warcraft was notorious for people hacking accounts, and I'd logged in a couple of times to find my character's bank completely emptied and no money in his pockets, and it was pretty upsetting. I use this thing all the time. So the bottom line is when you're dealing with authentication, remember a good strong password, a good local security policy, and if you're really paranoid, some multi-factor authentication will keep the people you don't want on your computer out.